All right. Well, welcome to the second live stream for my channel, my YouTube channel. And if you're watching this on Facebook, welcome as well. I'm very excited about this one today. This is actually going to be a live stream with someone I've mentioned in previous YouTube videos, my oldest brother slash mentor, George Locke. He's going to be joining us here shortly, but I just want to give a shout out to all those who watched the previous stream last week and how it was pretty successful. And I was so excited about it that I decided to do it again. So without further ado, let's bring on my brother and we'll get going on this. Hey, George, how's it going?
It's going well.
So George,
How
I
are
want
you?
you to, I'm doing well, thanks. I want you to introduce yourself and kind of give us a little bit of a backstory on why you got into photography.
Well, I started when I actually began my career by going to film school. And it was during film school that I started to explore photography a little bit. And I bought my first SLR 35 millimeter. And it was just a fun hobby and it related to the career I was pursuing. And the one thing that I always found that I was fascinated by light, uh, just the way that it changes throughout the day, the way that it changes with weather and with conditions, and how the world changes. I would notice. I mean, even now, I get a little. It can be a little obnoxious because I'll watch how light falls on people's faces, and it can seem a little creepy. But I just enjoy that aspect of it. So I pursued it as a hobby mostly for about 10 years or so. And then once I started doing more corporate work, I became more interested in corporate photography and things like headshots, product photography, and group photography, things like that. And I started when I was working for a corporation in the marketing department. And as I grew there, started going to workshops, and of course, I took photography classes. Started to really love it, and then I started adding that to my repertoire for freelance. And as I explored that more, got to do more corporate events, did some traveling with it, and not long after that, left the corporate world and went full time with my freelance, mostly focused on corporate videography, but I would occasionally do some corporate photography as well. And pretty much took photography back to something I loved and something I explored. What I do for fun with photography is mostly landscape. Just it's a way for me to kind of explore the natural world. But now it's just one of the assets I have in my toolbox that I'll pull out and be able to use for my clients and really enjoy it.
Awesome. So you would, I actually don't think I've ever even asked you that question. I always knew my oldest brother as the photography guy, but I never really understood like how you got into it. So that was actually really fascinating to me to see how you kind of got into it. So as a, I want to answer. I can't get my words straight. What is one of the biggest downfalls you've seen, like one of the biggest frustrations you've seen as a photographer, like whether it be in your own line of work or with dealing with other photographers and clients?
Biggest frustration?
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest potential challenges with photography is not being prepared. That can come from a number of places. Either, one of the biggest deals, especially when you're being hired by a client, is for you to be prepared for pretty much any situation that can happen. For example, I was at a a corporate shoot just the other day. We had a large, we did a large company shoot. So it was like 75 employees all in the same shot. And we decided we're going to go up the canyon, uh, and we're going to get a drone shot and just have a nice dramatic image. So I hired a drone guy to come up. Even though I'm licensed myself, I just didn't want to deal with it. So I brought him on. Got everybody lined up, ready to take the shot, and his drone failed and couldn't get it working. So I had my own kit with me, quickly went out, grabbed my Canon and put the right lens on and got everybody to line up and stack up. And it's not exactly the same shot that we were originally going to get, but they went to the trouble to gather everybody there. We had a lot of effort that went into making sure the shot happened. So there was no excuse for not being ready to go. And we end up getting the shot anyway. It's a little different, but the client's still happy with it. And it's just the nature of the work. You just have to be prepared for what can happen.
Yeah, that's true. I had a photo shoot. It was like not this past Christmas, but a year ago from last Christmas, and it was with the family. I met them in Kaysville, Utah, and we met at this kind of like foresty kind of area. It was a husband and wife, and they had like 2 kids, and then like the older son had like his fiance with them as well. And so like since she was gonna be part of the family, they wanted her in the family shots. Well, the younger son, he's probably like between the ages of like 12 and 14, insisted on having his iPhone in his front pocket in all the shots. His parents kind of like got after him for all this. He was being very uncooperative. He wouldn't smile. And I just remember thinking in my mind, like, it's kind of like that whole thing you just talked about with being prepared. You have to be prepared for the best and be prepared for the worst. And this kid was being so irritating to me, but at the same time, like, I knew that since I was being hired by the client to take these photos for them, I had to bite my tongue, and I had to just kind of let the parents do and deal with him as they pleased. And I mean, it turned out that I got some great shots for them, but at the same time, like when I was going through and editing the shots, you could clearly see that bulge in his front button-up pocket where his iPhone was. And, Photoshop is great, but you can't really fix too much when there's a bulging smartphone in your front pocket. So I've had other instances where I was doing, I don't know if you remember, but when you told me I needed to do the free photo sessions, when I first started out in photography, there was a lady that had contacted me to do some free session shots, and she was coming from like Sunset or something, and I was meeting her out at this bird refuge place out here in the West Layton area, and I was like, try to get out there as soon as you can because the sun's gonna set, and we just can't really do too much after it's dark. And so I kept waiting out there, and she finally came, but we were only able to get a few shots. And so then, because she had a hard time finding it, and I felt so bad for this lady, I gave her another free photo session, but and that one was successful, but it was just kind of frustrating because you have to be prepared for whatever happens.
Yeah, and photography is all about being creative and taking the situation, the elements that you have to work with, and just making it work. Obviously, you want to create the most ideal situations possible. But even like with the story with the little kid, and while a bulge in the pocket might be kind of obnoxious, far worse would be somebody who's got a terrible face because he's just unhappy because he's feeling this agitation or this irritation. So a lot of photography, especially when you're being hired, is people skills. It's just assumed that you know what to do once everything's set up, ready to go. You know when to take the shot and how to get it. But you also have to be able to create that situation where everybody's happy, everybody feels comfortable. You're giving them good information about how to make help look as good as possible, and just set everything up. And that's part of what being a business owner is understanding that it's not just the one service that you offer, but it's this whole complete experience. Um, Especially when you're a small business owner, you're doing everything. You're working the books and you're doing your own advertising, but you're also doing your own interfacing with the customers. And sometimes it's nice to have an assistant where they can come along and help pick up some of the pieces so you can focus more specifically on the client you're working with. But for the most part, it's all on you. So it's a little more than just knowing the tech. It's about liking to work with people, and if you don't like to work with people, hiring somebody that does.
Exactly. I mean, I've worked in different industries where people didn't really want to work in the general public, but and I thought in my mind, like, then why are you working in this retail store? Like, if you don't want to be around the general public, like, I don't understand. But at the same time, I realized I'm like, well, they're just needing a job, and so they just thought, well, I could probably manage and deal with it just to get paid, to get some kind of a paycheck. But I was gonna ask you a question. Do you remember your first big photo shoot and how nervous you were?
Uh, it's interesting because I still find myself with projects that have some element of newness about them. Like this last one I just did. Um, the situation was, shooting a large group is not that different, but shooting in this location, shooting in the, with using the drone. There's just all these elements that were kind of new for me. So in situations like that, and as it happened, what caused me to feel, I don't know, a little bit of anxiety about it is they're unknowns.
Mhm.
And the key is just to say, okay, I've got some things in my back pocket that I know I can make it work. Or I set the expectations with the client and say, hey, this is new. This will be fun. We're going to just roll with this and kind of set this tone of flexibility and creativity. So it helps take some of that nervousness away. Um, some of the projects I've worked on have been, some are for small companies, some are for large companies, and the key is just to focus on the outcome as much as you can. Just trying to be as creative and thoughtful about the work that you're doing as much prep as you can, and then just being in kind of a calm mindset to where you can roll with the situation and to kind of take it as it comes. It's usually it's no good to worry. If you've done all the prep you can do, it's best to just go into it with an open mind and just see what happens. And oftentimes I learn a lot and I have a great experience, and your attitude is going to also affect the kind of experience that the people you're working with are going to have. Unless you completely drop the ball, for the most part, it'll work out great, and everybody come away feeling good about it. So I like to find those opportunities. I like to try to push and do things. It's satisfying to be able to go into a project that I've done a lot of times and know if I do this, this, and this, I'm going to get a very predictable outcome. But it's also fun to go and try something new and see what else I can do to push my photography and my learning.
No, I like that because even as a you know I haven't been doing photography as long as you have, obviously, because you're the one that taught me. But it's really cool to be able to learn new facets of photography and kind of push the borders per se. Um, so I don't know if you remember this, but I remember when I first got my DSLR, and you were there when I got my first DSLR. You said something to me that at first was like really intimidating. You said, "It's like you've just entered into a world where there's a ton of photographers," and when you said that to me, my heart dropped right down into my stomach. I was like, "Oh, oh no! Like what have I just done?" Like I was like starting to get some fear going through my mind, but then you counteracted that. I said, but that's the great thing, is that now that you are in this field, you'll be able to have that much more help. You'll be able to get some constructive criticism from other photographers, and you'll be able to, share your work and be able to give feedback to other people's work as well. And so you basically were kind of encouraging me to not only pursue my profession in photography, but to help others as well.
Yeah, it's photography is like a family. Um, I found that there's this wonderful community where people love the art itself, and whether that's the kind of the craftful part or the technical part, that they just love to share it. And sometimes it's more formally, sometimes it's paid, but it's so accessible. And the other beauty is, especially now with DSLRs, there's virtually no cost involved. Once you have that camera, you have a decent lens, you can go experiment and take thousands of shots of you just exploring and trying things and learning from that process. But it's even better when you can go and do that with other people who are also going through that process. Some of the best experiences I had and helped me grow the most were when I attended workshops, um, photo walk groups, and there's sometimes we would host in the area that I work in, we would host groups where we hire some models together as a group and just take turns working with models and experimenting with different setups, different lighting setups, and we'd hire a makeup artist, etc. And it just gives you that exposure to different approaches to photography, different types of photography, and it feels safe because you're all learning together, um, and you all share the expense of hiring these different elements. So it's just a fun world to be involved in. And if you come across somebody who feels like they don't want to share as much, it's not a big deal because there's 5 more people that are willing to share. So it's really a lot of fun, and the community aspect of it is a big part of it.
No, I think that's great. And I love that because, I think back to my live stream that I did with my friend Lito last week, and he was talking about how the guy that he learned photography from, um, I can't even remember the guy's name. So Lito, if you're watching this, or if you are watching this on the replay, put it in the comments. But he's talked about this guy that he learned from online, and that guy that started this website, when he first got interested in photography, it was before like a lot of YouTube tutorials were going on and everything, and it almost felt like photographers had the same attitude as like magicians, where they wanted to keep all their tricks and secrets to themselves, and they didn't really want to let those out into the public. Mm-hmm. And so this guy that Lito learned from, he said, he's like, well, I feel like people need to learn this kind of stuff because there's going to be a lot more people in the coming years that are going to really be interested in photography. And if they don't have these resources, they're not going to be as successful. And so like he started doing like free workshops you could attend. And then, he started doing all this stuff. And so I think that, like you said, if you don't have someone that wants to share like, tips and tricks, then that's fine. You can forget about them because like you said, you'll find that many more that will be willing to say like, okay, well, I would have changed this. I would do this different next time. And you've done that with me. And I don't know if you remember that first photo session that I emailed you from that first free photo session. It was really blurred. It was washed out. And you gave some constructive criticism, but at the same time you said, just keep going, keep trying, because that's how you're going to gain experience. But The next question I wanted to ask you would be, let's say if you were to talk with a new and upcoming beginning photographer, and let's say if they thought, if they were to come to you and say, George, I have a tendency to, I want to compare my work to you, or I want to compare my work to that famous YouTuber, Peter McKinnon, what would you suggest for them to do to not to compare themselves to others? Like, what advice would you give them?
It's good to see the work of other people, to appreciate it, and to kind of noodle out how they did it. If you approach it from the perspective of trying to learn, um, the danger is when you try to copy it, when you try to say, okay, I want to be successful, and the way to be successful is to make all my photography look like this photographer's. And it's limiting. It's limiting you because you are your own person. You have your own experiences that you bring to the art, and you want to be able to put that signature in there, and that's only going to come through experimentation, putting a lot of time and thought, and a lot of trying and failing into that. So I look at somebody that has a solid following. They have notoriety, and I just remind myself that they just went down the same path. That's the only thing they were doing, and I have to do the same thing. I have to find my own way. I can use them as a reference to say, okay, I'm curious how he lit that scene, and I take my own lights and see what I could do to reproduce that image for my own education, not because I want to create something that looks like his, but I just want to understand the mechanics that went into it. And it's just a good exercise to help me better understand, the physics of light, how to work with light, and all the creative possibilities. Because then once I figured it out, I can say, okay, he did this. I'm going to explore it in this way.
Yeah.
I'm going to change the setting. I'm going to change the theme, or I'm going to move the lights. It's like, okay, I figured it out. I don't like that look as much, but I'm glad I know how he did it. So I look at some of the Instagram guys and YouTubers in that way, where it's like, okay, that's cool. That's inspiration for me, and information in some cases. And then I just still continue on my own journey.
No, I think that's important. I was in a chat room with some people on that social media app Clubhouse.
Mm-hmm.
It was about a month and a half ago or so, and one of the guys, his name was Ned. His name was Professor Nez, and we were talking. He was talking with me, and at the time, like, I was just barely starting out on YouTube. Like, I hadn't really put out many videos, and I was kind of comparing myself to that YouTuber Peter McKinnon, and Nez. He kind of he didn't beat around the bush at all. He just says, like, Anthony, he's like, there are over 7 million people on this earth, and there's only one you. He's like, if people wanted to go and look at work from like Peter McKinnon, they could just go follow him. But they're
Mm-hmm.
wanting to click on your stuff because they want to know what you are bringing to the table. And I think that goes hand in hand with like photography. Like, you think about any of these professional photographers, and I include you in that. If let's say if I wanted to go and try to copy your work, that's not really. I feel like you're not really improving if you're just wanting to copy that person's work. Like, so if I was just wanting to copy your work, that's great and all, but like if individuals wanted to see your work, then they could just look up like your work, and they could look up your name, they could go to your Facebook pages and such, but they were looking at me saying like, okay, well, what is he having to offer? And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we as a society have, especially in photography. And I wanted to ask that question because I have sometimes found myself, especially when I first began in photography, comparing myself to others and saying like, I will never be that kind of a photographer, or like, that person is so good, I wish I could be like them. But at the same time,
I think it's important to remember your why with your craft. Like why photography for you,
Mm-hmm.
and maintain that as your measurement. Because for me, it's all about curiosity. I see an image or I see a scene, a setup, and I'm curious about it. Or if I have an idea that, an idea that just kind of comes to me and I think, I wonder how I could do that. That tells me I'm on the right track, that I'm doing creative things. I'm following the right path for my photography because I'm asking those questions. I'm not saying, how do I get more likes, more followers, or anything like that. However, one thing I do find that's kind of a worthy um, measurement is knowing how people interact with what I create.
Mm-hmm.
Can I create something that generates a reaction, some kind of emotion, or some experience for them when they take it? Does it raise questions for them, or make them wonder something about it? To me, that was also successful because ultimately we're trying to communicate and connect with each other through the art that we make. So if I create something that inspires someone to want to travel someplace or to be somewhere, or it triggers a memory for them. This happens a lot with my photography where they say, it reminds me of a time when I was, outdoors and taking in a sunset, and I was there with someone that I really cared about. Those kinds of reactions and engagements are really meaningful, and it really helps motivate me with what I'm doing. When it comes to professional photography, I like to use a measurement of how is this photograph that I'm creating going to help my client? Is it going to be something, if it's corporate, it's going to help them. If I'm doing corporate headshots, it's going to help them land their next job or to present themselves professionally on LinkedIn or some other platform. That's the kind of feedback I'm looking for, and that's how I know that I'm I'm doing well with what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I'm just always looking for those measurement opportunities rather than comparing myself to other photographers on kind of vanity
Mm-hmm.
metrics. I'm actually looking for how am I touching the lives of other people through what I do.
There's a great quote that from that movie Hitch that I'm sure you've seen with Will Smith, and it's talking. He says, life is not about the breaths you take, but it's about the moments that take your breath away." And
Mhm.
and I think that that it goes hand in hand with photography because that really should be your goal as a photographer. You shouldn't be doing this just to get the paycheck and to say like, oh well, I did this, and what did you do? I mean, yeah, there are some times when you want to kind of show off your work, and I've done that. But at the same time, like you want to, as you mentioned, you want to leave an impact in someone's life. If you see a landscape shot, you think someone somewhere this is going to really touch their hearts and it's going to make them feel really good because they're going to maybe even recall like a memory. They're gonna really enjoy that photo. And I've actually had that happen where um, I was taking a sunset shot, and it was interesting because when I showed it to a coworker, she ended up wanting to buy a copy of it, and so she paid for the copy. I gave it to her, but she bought it for a friend, and when she showed that friend just jaw just dropped. She's like, "Oh my goodness! Like that's just gorgeous! Like I don't." So there's just so many parts of this photo that I love. And those are the kind of things I love to hear that people, when they see my work, there's like, how did you get that shot? Like, you just timed that so right. And I was like, it's all about just making sure you're right there at the right time and making sure you are patient because there have been times when I thought I've had some great shots, but at the same time, when I went back to edit them, they were garbage. And I'm sure you've had that happen quite a bit over the years. But
Mhm.
But I just kind of wanted to get that out there that, everyone, no one's perfect when it comes to photography. I'm sure that even to this day, you still learn different concepts in photography and how to change things up and make things look that much more the way you want them to look. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of rambled there for a little sec. I had a lot of information coming out of my mind. But let's kind of transition. You brought up something earlier that I wanted to talk about, and that is being a small business owner. Now, as a small business owner, what would you say is the biggest time consuming part about being a small business owner, especially as a photographer?
The business. A lot of times when we think about, starting a business in some creative, application, we think we're going to spend a lot of time, taking pictures. If I'm a wedding photographer, event photographer, this could be me shooting weddings all the time. The reality is that you spend about 20% of your work time doing the work. 80% of the time is work in the business.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting clients, getting yourself in front of clients, building relationships, managing all the behind the scenes, your accounting, um, all the things that you have to do so that you're ready to do the work when it's available. And so much of it is making those connections, constantly being a presence in working with partners. Like if I were a wedding photographer, I'd be connecting with other vendors that are also serving the wedding industry and making sure that they know me, they know my work, and I'm also, paying it forward for them. I'm referring people to them. Uh, it's just spending so much time making sure that everybody who's a good potential client for me knows about me. And this is the reason why you really have to focus with your business. You have to have a very as niche as possible approach to your work, because trying to be that one guy that does everything is just so limiting. Even though that sounds like like an ironic statement, um, the fact is it takes so much work to reach out to one particular audience. You really need to be able to focus on the audience, and then you have to be really good at that one thing that you're doing. If you're asking somebody to pay you X number of dollars in fees, you need to be able to deliver on that
Mm-hmm.
and make it worth it. So, someone who says I can shoot pretty much anything is doing themselves and their client a disservice. And most importantly, it's just setting yourself up for a diluted marketing effort, business effort. You just can't be that one guy to everybody.
Yeah, you have to just focus on one thing. And that's one thing I've always noticed about you is that you focus more on the landscape side of things, especially like as a hobby. And that's one thing I've always been fascinated about is that, there's sometimes when I've seen photos from that you've posted online where you're like out in the dead of winter, and snowstorms and such, and you're just trying to get those good shots. And I thought in my mind, like, man, he must have been cold, but that just shows that you were that dedicated to getting those shots because you knew what you were looking for, and you probably thought, well, I know what I need to do, so I'm willing to do that so I can go get those shots.
Well, and it's also the curiosity that drives me, because I get an image in my head. It's like I've always wanted to. I I want a great winter image, and I know in order to get that, I have to get someplace at a certain time that is going to allow me to have that opportunity. I'm going to pay that price. I'm going to get up early. I'm going to go out. I'm going to be cold, but I don't really feel it because I'm motivated by my project, by my goal, and fascinated by the whole process of it. To me, part of the reward is the effort. It's the work to get to that place, because it creates memories, it creates experience, it makes me stronger as a person, help me realize I can do harder things. and it just informs the whole process, so that when I have that image, it's not just me being lucky that I was at the right place at the right time, but as I worked for it.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the whole small business thing. It gives you that motivation to keep going because you know that this is something that you love to do. I've had instances where I've just had some really great experiences, like being a small business owner, whether it be dealing with clients or just being out in the wilderness taking photos. That just made me kind of have that same kind of curiosity. It's almost like we're brothers or something. Um, for those watching, we actually are brothers. He's my oldest brother, but it's just been one thing that I've always loved to do. I love capturing those special moments, whether it be like just if I'm by myself and capturing those landscape shots, or if I'm capturing moments for other people. Like, I've captured some moments for people that they've really appreciated. There was a quick experience that I had a few summers ago. I shot for a family called their names were they were the Lauder family. They were here in the Davis County area, and I won't get into too many specifics, but they were getting ready to adopt some kids, and just the whole experience. I had actually ended up spending like an hour and a half to 2 hours with this family, and I walked away from that experience feeling so good about myself. Not only that I was getting paid to do something that I loved, but also that I got to meet this family in specific, and that I was able to help them to get some photos and to capture some moments that they had wanted for so long. And I think that that's one of the things that's kind of rejuvenized me, especially as a small business owner, is just those little moments where you just think, okay, well, this is why I do this. This is why I do what I do, so I can have these experiences with people I could no way and nowhere else I could have these experiences if I wasn't a small business owner.
It is a unique opportunity to connect with people in that way. So it's really great.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer because I know that you're a pretty busy guy and you got a lot of stuff on your plate. But the one last thing that I would ask is that if you were to say to anything to any upcoming photographers or videographers who may come across this live stream on a replay, what encouraging advice would you give them?
Mostly put in the time, make projects for yourself. Don't just rely on trying to get people to pay you to do projects. Go out and do personal work. And even when you get to the point where you're doing a lot of commercial work, paid work, keep doing personal projects, because that's where you have total control. You can still explore, push yourself. Um, just look for those opportunities to do something that is just your own curiosity. And if you pay some money to do it, don't even hesitate, because you're paying for your education.
Hmm.
It's the best way to learn anything. We can sit and watch YouTube videos all day and really walk away with it not really knowing anything, because we haven't put our hands into the process. And photography is a very hands-on work and art. It's something that you have to prepare for, and then you actually have the act, and then you have the post-processing. So giving yourself those opportunities to do personal projects, whatever you're interested in the moment, go do it. And don't worry if nothing even turns out.
Yeah.
It's all about the journey. But chances are, the more you do that, the more you're going to discover things. And oftentimes, it's stuff that you can put in your portfolio that a client wasn't quite ready to pay for, but once they see it in your portfolio, they'll come along and say, "Yeah, I'll pay for that." So I know a lot of professional commercial photographers generate most of their work that way, by starting with a personal project that they had paid thousands of dollars to produce, and then that will generate work because it was innovative, it was interesting, and they just create a great execution. and a big part of that is the collaboration they do. They will bring on the talent, they'll bring on hair, makeup, um, and even, digital media assistants and things like that. They'll create a professional set environment, so that they have the experience of working in that environment. Because it's a little intimidating to say to a client, hey, let's do this project for you, and you're going to have to pay to hire these people so that we have a full production set, but you've never done it before. So you don't really know what you're hiring and why you're hiring them. So sometimes you do, but a lot of times um, you work with other people in your local area and you just do it for trade. You say, I can go to a hair and makeup person, I can go to a model, and they're happy to participate and just get the photos in trade so that they can experiment with their work of what they're doing. So that's my main piece of advice, is just go experiment and collaborate with others, and just explore what makes you curious about photography.
Okay, well, if you guys want to check out his Facebook pages, I put them in the description. And George, thanks for taking the time to talk with me about this. I always look up to you in your work, not only just as my older brother, but also just as a photographer in general. But, you're very skilled, you're very talented. And I hope that those who are listening to this, even on the replay, that they will have some encouragement to keep going in their photography and in their pursuits as a photographer in the future. So thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for the chance.
Thank you. And for those now watching, I am going to be ending this broadcast. This has been fun to talk with George. And if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we'll catch you later.